Well, we've got a very fascinating guest on the show with us this evening. Dami Cosmic Girl, would you like to introduce our guest?
I would love to. We've got our special guest is Stephen Spencer, who is a psychic
Clairvoyant, yes.
and clairvoyant, yes. And I've known Stephen for quite a few years. No, a lot longer than that.
Add a zero to that.
Yeah, add a zero, 30 years, more like it. Because I remember you invited me to do a few Sunday night shows on a radio show.
Yeah, that's
Gosh,
so long ago.
that was a long time ago. They were 2-hour shows, and it was very draining, actually.
Yes, it was.
Yes,
So
but
she
very
was
interesting.
complaining about radio back then, which is who?
I was complaining about it too, actually.
Something's never changed.
So Stephen's. I've invited Stephen to come along and talk about himself, his abilities, his experiences. So can you tell us when and how did you first realise that you had these psychic abilities?
When it actually started to take off was more around 18. So that's about 44 years ago. There was a couple other experiences beforehand. I used to work at night, and I used to run home from work, and I used to have two voices, one which I clearly identify as my own, and then this other philosophical voice that used to talk to me, and it would only talk to me as long as I was heading home, and never irritated me or anything like that. So that probably started around about 16. But it was more around 18 when it started to take off. And around about 22, I think it was when I started becoming professional.
Oh, now I have to say, if I was walking along and I was hearing voices in my head, I'd be thinking, is there any history of family mental illness like schizophrenia? Because, I would question that myself. I mean, did you go through that yourself? Did you think, am I losing it or?
No. Because the voice was always quite calm, quite relaxed. It wasn't telling me to do anything, etc. It was always philosophical. It would seem to be supportive, and like I said, other than when I was going home, it never interfered in any other part of my life. Which is one of the things with the clairvoyance, from my standpoint, is 99% of the time, if I'm not doing a session with a person, it's not interfering with me, unless there's something important.
Uh-huh.
And I'll give you an example of important. We used to have a shop in Roma Street. I used to park at Paddington in the morning. One particular morning, I got out of the car and the voice, something in me went, hope my wife can find the car if anything happens to me. I went, A couple of minutes later, hope she knows what to do with my brand new bike because it's bought. Anyway, I went to the shop, did some other jobs, went for a walk, all that sort of stuff I used to do. And then it was time to head back up to Paddington. And if you know the courts in Roma Street and then the Roma Street station, there's a set of lights there. The lights changed so I could go for a run. Well, you go, for a walk, and I was some distance away. So I thought, I'll run for it. And then when I got really close to the footpath, something in me went, walk. So I says, well, because if I took one more step out, or if I continued to run, I wouldn't be sitting here today. Wow. So it stopped me from being knocked over, more likely killed, because this vehicle went clearly through a red line. By the time I got the other side of the road, I went, why did you stop that from happening? Well, at least I've been free.
Yeah.
But I didn't tell my wife about that until I was nearly home. When I did, she said, I was going to tell you to be careful about crossing the road. So the voice was there.
So it can be helpful to have these abilities, but
it's saved us more than once.
Yeah. When is it a hindrance?
I don't think I can say it ever has been.
No.
First dates, when you're trying to toss the coin to work out
No,
whether
I've got
she's
a story
keeper or
about
not.
that too.
Oh, here we go. I think this is our first ever Strange Encounters psychic first date story.
Let's have it.
Ring-a-ding-ding.
Spit it out.
Okay, I'll start from the beginning. My wife is going to kill me.
Oh, it's a wife story as well. This is like double jeopardy.
This goes back just over 26 years ago, 26 and a half years ago, I think. I was unattached at the time. I was quite playful at the time, but the voice told me it's not to be playful, no longer be playful, because she was going in my life, would not like it. Anyway.
We're staring at each other over the mics.
Cosmic Girl and I are just staring at each other going, whoa, okay, righto. Keep going, Steve.
Thunder.
What was that, Bazza?
A clap of thunder.
A clap of thunder, a bit of lightning, bit of thunder, yeah, I guess so.
Anyway, now I've lost the story.
No, come on. Here we go. This is great.
Anyway, a lady had a session with me. In the session, I said to her that there would be a death in the family. It's not your partner, but it's a strong male. Well, she had 2 sons. One you could never call as strong. The other one, he was very strong personality, etc. She clearly identified who it was, because she then apparently, after the session, went up and they had lunch together, and she said what I had said to him. 2 months later, he was killed in a motorbike accident. Okay. She came back, and the daughter came back, etc., etc., etc. And I did the session with the mother, then the daughter. In the session with the daughter, I said, "Who's this with blue eyes?" I could fall in love with her. Okay. The second part in that was that the daughter, was attracted to me. I wasn't attracted to her, I might add, at all. Oh, there's the look again.
There's a lot of eye contact here with Cosmic Girl and I. Anyway, keep going to this. Excellent.
Anyway, it came out about the death, etc. And in the session, I said this girl could do with a meditation course. 2 weeks later, I get this phone call. "Oh, do you know anyone who can run a meditation course?" I remember that the sister of the man who died was someone attracted to me. Anyway, I named off a half a dozen places, etc. And then she turns around and said, "Oh, can you do it?" And I went, "Oh, okay." So I said, get to half a dozen people, I can do this little meditation course, etc. Anyway, I did mention about the blue eyes, didn't I? Yes. Okay. The first night of it, I went up the stairs, down the hallway. I was expected to be walking into the dining area in a Punjabi suit, and I was in blue jeans, black T-shirt.
What now?
Like, what?
A Punjabi suit.
What is that?
That's an Indian outfit that, religious Indian people tend to wear. Okay.
Bazza would have one of those, wouldn't you, Bazza?
Yeah, I've got a beanie that goes with it.
Okay, Punjabi suit. Righto. They're going to Google that.
Anyway.
Let the man tell his story. Listeners, the number for complaints is
3821 0022, and it's Cosmic Girl.
I end up sitting opposite this girl, felt guilty the whole night because she had blue eyes and I was staring at her. I didn't even notice that she was pregnant.
Oh. That's
because
awkward.
she was the wife of the man who died.
Oh.
They had been married 3 weeks when he died. Okay.
Oh, that's sad.
She used to walk around at that point going, "Life's a bitch and then you die." Okay. Anyway, at that point in my life, I wasn't looking for anybody anymore, etc. I was over all you horrible creatures, etc.
Are you talking about us females?
Yeah.
Edit that out, won't you?
Absolutely not. I feel your pain at the moment there, Steve. Let me tell you. There's a lot of that going around.
Anyway. Oh, my goodness. Anyway,
Well, you didn't think this was going to be a serious paranormal program, did you?
Well,
you obviously haven't listened to our shows before. All right. No, this is great. Keep going. Fantastic.
Anyway. The course, I think I ran the course for 6 weeks. At the end of it, I decided I was just going to be friends with your species.
Okay.
And
3821.
The story gets even more interesting. Anyway.
You feeling a bit sheepish, Bazza?
Poor Stephen, he's not getting the story
This
out.
is fantastic.
No, I just
love
want to
this.
know, did you marry this woman?
Hang on.
It's more to the
I'll
story.
get to that point. Anyway, I had a game called Transformation that came from Finhorn.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
which I still have somewhere in the house. they were interested in playing this game, Transformation. If you ever played Transformation, you know you need to have a focus point. So I had Vic and a few other people, females, or all females of your species, I don't know, sitting around. And
They tend to gather in groups, don't they?
yeah, they did too. Yes.
Yes.
It's called shopping.
Yes, I've noticed that. Anyway, you have to have this focus point, and it could be anything from money, relationships. And I went in my head. I was started thinking about relationships, and names started popping through my head. My wife's name is Vic. Anyway, and name Vicky came into my head, and as the name came into my head, felt like I was hit from behind. Remember what we were talking about before?
Yes.
And her name came out of my mouth, and everybody stared at me. And that was actually pretty much the beginning of our relationship from that point on.
Friday nights on BFM with Cosmic Girl and Sifu.
There was one other story that would go with that. After Vic and I started being a couple, Vic didn't want anybody to know because of the dead husband sort of thing, okay, which was fine. Anyway, one day Vic asked me the dreaded question, where do dead people hang out? And I knew what she meant. Did she mean in the bedroom?
Yes, I was just thinking the same thing myself.
Actually, I was thinking cemeteries, but so it just goes to show you, I was way off. I was way off the mark.
It's a pretty dead place, cemeteries.
Most of them are pretty ill too. They got coughed badly.
God, this is terrible.
Oh dear! All right.
Anyway, so I hummed and hawed around the question, knowing what she was getting at, and she finally said, "Well, in the bedroom." And I said, "Well, yes, of course. So, they're not necessarily restricted by walls, are they?" Okay. She then 2 days later went and saw another reader called Ruby. Now I remember her name, this woman's name, but Vic doesn't. I've never heard of this woman again. Anyway. Vic's first husband came up through the reading, okay, and guess what he said? He spends all his time in the bedroom.
Oh, so he's watching.
Well, obviously heard that and wanted to make a joke out of it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay.
Was he a bit of a jokester?
Well, I never knew him, so I couldn't say.
Yeah.
The other story, it comes into the idea of a Ouija board.
Oh,
Remember
yes.
that first stage
Ouija
when Vic
boards.
and I were together? Nobody knew that we were together. His mother and sister and a couple of other people who I don't know apparently sat around a Ouija board, okay, which is not something I would necessarily recommend, but sometimes they are stable enough to use. Well, her first husband came through the board, okay. Anyway, they asked him, was there a message for Vicky? Guess what it spelled out? For Stephen, take care of Vicky.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Anytime he's come through, in any situation, he's always been supportive. Absolutely supportive.
Now, I've got to ask you a question about that. Like, when the deceased
Yes.
send these messages through,
Yeah.
how do they know where and when to tap in to you to, say through a Ouija board or even through someone like yourself, a clairvoyant psychic?
Well, look, there's theories about that. And I don't know if you can always take what people say, okay? At least the live ones, okay? I would tend to think...
We keep looking at each other, Cosmic Girl and I. We're just doing, we're sort of like this sort of
Live
like-
ones? What do you mean? The dead ones have got it right? I don't know what.
Well, they are open to more information than what we have.
Yeah.
Okay, they clearly have. But if...
That's interesting because that's two different schools of thought. Because I've talked to people before, clairvoyants, that say no, they do not. They only have the scope of their knowing and their seeing is no different from when they were alive. And then you have others that say it's vastly different.
Yeah, from my standpoint, when you pass over, you don't become necessarily enlightened straight away. Some people may do instantaneously. So, the one rule I have when it comes to spirit people is there's no rule.
Okay,
Any
fair enough.
rule we make for them is usually wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. So some people, I've certainly had my fair share of spirit people who came across, and I've actually said to clients, well, I don't know, we should take too much notice of your mother. She was a biased beep, 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 et cetera. And frequently the client has said, yeah, well, you're right. But then there's others who seem to be able to access much more information, okay, which I'll tell you a story about a long-term thing with that. So it probably varies from spirit person to spirit person, et cetera.
I guess the bottom line is that we're trying to discuss the another domain with tools from this domain. Like we're talking about the mechanics of the universe, aren't we?
Yes.
So who knows?
Yeah. If you look at quantum physics, etc., some of the theories that are coming out of quantum physics, even about time, is quite mind-blowing. As such, which will bring me into the story from over 30 years ago. I had a client who came to see me 30 years ago. She came back a couple of years ago, and she said to me, everything you've said has happened, but other things are actually happening now. So 30 years ago or more, I was saying things about her life. There was no way any of us on this physical plane should be able to access. Mm-hmm. And yet everything that was said was happening, has happened or happening at this point now. The other thing, to go to the beginning of that story, when she came for the session, I told her that she'd meet a man who had 2 kids and then she would have 2 kids to him. She walked out quite angry at me because her plan at the time was to become a nun. Mm. And guess what happened? She met a man who had 2 kids, and then she had 2 kids with this man. Mm. So what we plan today isn't necessarily what's going to happen tomorrow. Mm. But from a clairvoyant standpoint, the relevance of time and destiny comes into that story. Do we have free will or we don't? Are we simply controlled by a predestined or response? Now, I can't answer that question. I can ask the question, but I have not been able to work it out. If I go back to the Roman Street and where I could have been killed, was that predestined for the inner voice to say walk instead of run?
Cosmic Girl, are you a destiny type of girl? Or are you
yes
a
and no.
free choice type of person?
No, I think it's a mix. I think, I've looked into astrology, and I think there's something like anything that I might go, I wonder if that's true. I go and study it, and I have done a bit of a study on astrology. And I mean some classes and reading books and all that. And there's definitely something in it, and there does seem to be a plan when you're born. So if you look at a natal astrological chart, it looks, most people go, what the heck is that? But it's actually like a stamp, or even like an imprint of the energy of the planets in your life at the time that you're born. It's like a cookie cutter, boom, boom, stamp, like a crop circle in a field. It comes down and it cuts it out. So you sort of work within that framework, but within that framework of your life, you make choices, and sometimes you go off the rails, and you come back on, and things happen. So I think, yes, there is a destiny, and a life path laid out for you, but how you go about it is up to you.
See, I find that from a logical standpoint illogical, because if you like the butterfly effect, if you step on the ant today, that ant's not going to be in 2,000 years breed a intelligent ant. So everything, even down to the ants being stepped on by us this afternoon, et cetera, et cetera. And it comes into the coincidental effect, which seems to be, I don't know about anybody else in this room, but it seems to have been a fairly strong thing in my life.
Explain that effect again. What are you saying?
The synchronicity, you mean?
Yes. To use a different word.
You used another term. What was that? The coincidental?
Coincidental.
Yeah. Effect. The man who died had to think about 2 and 1s, okay, to make 3, okay. Vic's birthday was the 21st, okay. He died 3 weeks later. His brother died 21 years to the month later. Now, the other point that one of my clients pointed out when I was telling that story was I actually live in number 3. So that number, even now, still seems to follow us to a certain degree. It's like 74. I used to live at 74 Oldfield, then we went to 74 Middle Park, etc. We bought a car at the end of that time, which was ended up as being 574. So that number seemed to follow us. I had a client a few years back. I used to have a little hand recorder where I used to record the session and plug that into the not laptop, PC, etc. Near the end of the session, I said to him, "What's this about 53?" And he went, "Oh, yeah, 53 is always coming in my life." He was so dynamic about the idea that 53 came up in his life. I looked down the recorder. That was set to stop on an hour, but it stopped. Guess on what?
53.
No. 53 minutes and 53 seconds.
Oh, yes. Actually, I agree with you there on that point about numbers because without revealing too much about my age, but
27.
I got my driver's license.
I was expecting Barry to chime in.
Number 2 is my special number.
Wait.
It's down the hallway.
I got my driver's license on the 6th of the 6th, 1976.
Friday nights on Bay FM with Cosmic Girl and Sifu.
And I got it on the 6th go. And it wasn't because I was a bad driver, by the way.
No, absolutely not. Because everybody takes 6 goes to get their license.
What colour car was yours?
No, there actually turned out to be some underhanded deal going on. It was actually exposed in the newspapers between the driving schools and the testing centre officers. No,
sorry.
that's true. I know because I was there. And I used to work in the transport department in the driver's licence issuing centres. I'm sorry. However.
That's why you're so familiar. That's my license.
But how do you explain that 6th of the 6th, 76 on the 6th go? I mean, that's really synchronous, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's weird. Also, the number of my house is 109. And when I went to work in a particular job, my locker in that place was 109. I mean, what are the odds of those sorts of things happening?
The odds are amazingly strong, especially in the case of my client. 53 minutes, 53 seconds. I could not make that
But what's
happen.
the significance of it, though? Sure, it happens.
Well, that's the question.
Why is it significant?
I think, well, from a shamanic viewpoint, I think that is a message from spirit. It's getting your attention about something and some people say, oh, it's confirmation. Well, maybe it is, but there are a lot of messages that come from spirit to us in different ways.
I can't disagree with that, but I can't agree with it.
Yeah.
it's one of
A
those sort of-
fence sitter. We like that, don't we? Yes.
Yeah. For me, because there is so many messages at times which seem to be abnormal compared to other people, there's much easier ways for them to get a message across to me than to do it with a number.
But maybe I'm not talking about messages from the deceased. I'm talking about messages from the Great Spirit.
Yeah, what's the difference at the end of the day?
Oh, well,
We're all connected to the consciousness behind the consciousness, etc., as I like to call it, which is something I meditate on. Is not the consciousness of the universe, but the consciousness behind the consciousness.
yes.
At the end of the day, the universe is going to get what it wants anyway. That's the only thing I'm actually convinced of. Okay, it will achieve what it wants to do. Okay, whatever that may be. Again, in quantum physics, there was a theory not too many years ago that within the Big Bang, within the first micro second, everything that ever was going to be was already programmed into it, which would include every thought, every action that we would do as well.
Well, there's been a lot of reevaluation in science lately, and the idea that there's a Big Bang is actually just starting to flush down the toilet. So,
well, there was also a theory of multiple Big Bangs.
yes, yeah. I don't know, Stephen. What do you think, Philippe?
Oh,
What do you think, Sifu?
I'm actually. This is weird because I don't feel well, and I keep looking to your right side, and I'm wondering what's going on. But I'm feeling really uneasy looking at you, Stephen. Ooh. And I don't know what that's about.
Are you picking something up?
I don't know what it is, but I feel uneasy.
that's my wife going to hit me because I told that story.
Could be. But I'm sort of sitting here and I keep trying to distract myself, but I keep looking there and I keep feeling uneasy about you.
Well,
So I don't know what that is.
the point from my standpoint when I'm doing a session or even during my given day, I examine my thoughts and where they come from and why they are there. Is there something like this morning, I actually thought of a client. Now, at the time, I went, there's absolutely no reason and no previous thought leading me to the thought of the client. Now, she hasn't phoned me or anything like that at this point, but the question still lies in the back of my head. Why did I have the thought of this person? Okay. And because a lot of our thinking is interconnected to things we've seen on TV or ads, or, look at 5:30 in the afternoon KFC ads telling us we're hungry. So there's a lot of programming that goes on out there, and programming between people talking to trigger memories and responses. So one of my practices is literally to follow my thinking back as far as I can take it.
Okay.
So if you follow your thinking back about looking at Stephen's side, go backwards and backwards and backwards.
Because before we started this, you were talking about feeling unwell.
Yes.
So is there a connection to that previous thought?
Yeah, it could be.
Yes.
Okay. Because if I'm somehow freaking you out...
No, I don't mean it that way. I mean it
in
like...
some subtle way. If I'm freaking you out, it can trigger that subtle response again.
How are you feeling at the moment?
I feel a little bit hot. Oh, no. Hot around the ears, but not around...
Yeah, okay. Well, now we're on body parts. Let's talk about how you received this information, because as I was saying to you earlier, James Van Prague said he received it through the throat. What about you?
Interesting question. I would actually describe it at times as a feeling that at times becomes a word. A sensation. I also, when I do a session, I call it the click. There's like a click in my, and then a click is the wrong word because it makes it sound like it's a sound in my head. And it's not, but it's like you click in. There's a very interesting chappie around called Darren Archer. Now, I've watched him over the last couple of years, and I've actually seen him when he clicks in. His face will actually light up as like suddenly he knows, etc. And to a degree, that's the way it feels to me. And then some session, it's like, I can know everything. Okay. In some sessions, it's like this mad fight to hear something or what's the connection, what am I feeling, what am I sensing, etc. The worst side of that is when usually before somebody turns up, I will try and relax and focus on the person. So I've got some information to start with. And then I can sort of continue from that point and feel comfortable and relaxed. The more uncomfortable ones is when the client turns up and I've got absolutely nothing until they sit down.
Have you ever had any sessions where you get absolutely nothing?
Yes.
Like
Not
nothing?
very often. Not very often. I had that happen in the last 6 months. Had 3 sessions on the day. First one went off perfectly. The second person turned up and there was nothing. And I sent her away, and it was sort of like, oh, God, is that going to happen with the third one? The third one turns up, and I laughed through the whole session. It was just an amazing session. So, yeah, it can happen. Is it to do with the person or some sort of event that they don't want this person to know about? Can be. Many years ago, I had a young lady turn up, and I actually had a good, strong spirit connection. But all it was saying to me was, don't continue. If you continue, you're going to pick up on something that will be extremely destructive to her personality, and you need to stop now. So I told her that, and she turned to me and she said, that's interesting because I saw an astrologer last week who said exactly the same thing.
Curious.
It is curious.
So that raises the question, as a psychic clairvoyant, have you ever had the experience, maybe in earlier days, I'm sure you have ways to protect yourself now, but where you've picked up on things from people and it stayed with you?
No. The only times it ever stay with me in any sense is what I've heard, because I'm also listening to what's being said, that's been so horrible that it's something that you don't really want to remember, etc. And occasionally you get that because people's lives can be at times quite horrendous.
Yes.
And, you know, like any normal human being, when you come across something that is emotionally challenging to listen to, that can stay with you a little bit. But
Yes.
normally, no.
So you don't feel you need to debrief or anything like that after, right?
If I debrief, I may debrief something too big.
Yeah.
And, you know, get it off my chest sort of thing. But, you know, if you're talking about some entity sticking with me, et cetera, when the session's over, it's over.
Yes. Do you do anything to actually finish it?
Sorry?
Do you do anything to actually make sure that there's a disconnect?
No, not anymore.
No, not anymore. So,
Not anymore. I used to use different meditation techniques
yeah.
in the early days, which, to be honest, I don't think was that relevant anyway, to be honest. And, you know, seeing I don't really believe in good and bad, I can give you a story about that.
Do.
When I was younger, I decided to lie down and meditate. And immediately there was this dark haze above my head. I went, ooh, what's that? What do I do? And the next thing, Luke Skywalker's lightsaber was in my hand. And I thought, what do I do with that? Tap it. So I tapped it. I didn't hit it. I just tapped it. And the outside shell broke away of the darkness, and there was such a brilliant light. So behind all darkness, there's always the light. So that's something I always remember. There's also a story about Des Newman House at Ipswich. This goes back many years ago, if you've heard Des Newman House. Not Ipswich, it's further out than that. Anyway, the first day, the building has 2 levels. The first day I did readings downstairs, and there was this banging, crashing.
Laidley Way?
Yeah, Laidley.
Yeah.
It's in Laidley. Okay. And there's banging, crashing going on above my head. And I was, you know, upstairs. And so at the end of the day, I said to the ladies, I said, there's a lot of banging, crashing up there. Is there somebody doing renovations up there? And they said, no, that's the spirit. Doesn't seem to like you. I went, oh, okay, bugger you. So the next day I went upstairs, and guess what? The banging, crashing went on downstairs.
Oh.
Apparently there was a German character in World War II who committed suicide in the building, and basically didn't like my presence being there. But that was his problem, not mine. So if we talk in terms of protection, it was kept away from me, you know, out of the way. And the bosses, as somebody used to call the dominant spirit people who control the situation, kept this individual away from me.
So tell us a bit about that, about dominant spirit people. What is that? How does it work?
The classical idea is that you've got spirit guides.
Can you see them?
Well, in theory, you can. And there's certainly one stage, there was one that I used to have a name to. But fundamentally, as long as they do their job, I don't care.
Friday nights on BFM with Cosmic Girl and Sifu.
You know, and my feelings will tell me if they're doing their job or...
Actually, I'll rephrase the question. Can you feel them all the time with you?
No.
No? They sort of like pop in, pop out? Can you feel anything?
Only if there's something important.
Can you feel anything now? I always ask that when we talk to mediums. When I talk to them, can you feel anything now?
No, because I'm sort of focused in a very logical sort of standpoint. Because, like I said, it's like a click. The interesting thing on that was last Friday. I tend to have coffee with my neighbour frequently on a Friday. Anyway, we hopped in the car. His ex-wife came with us this particular day, which is unusual, isn't it? And she sat in the back. Now, he decided to tease her, okay, knowing that I'm a clairvoyant. And he said, watch out, there may be somebody else sitting in the back seat. At that point, probably because I felt like there's the challenge, I turned to her and I said, no, there's not one person, there's 2 people. And one's called Lily. And she said, oh, yeah, I know who Lily was. So in that situation, I was in the right frame of mind to click in, et cetera, and it just happened.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Like I said, most of the time they leave me alone unless there's something important and something happening with the family or my wife or my wife. We often have the discussion about who had the original thought, where we'll have the same thought or we want the same dinner or have the same... Going down the Western Freeway one day, we were going down and we said the same miscellaneous statement at the same time, in the same tone. So it almost was like a stereo in the car.
That would be quite common for couples, I think.
It is apparently quite common for people to have a certain amount of commonality in their thinking patterns, etc. This has always happened when I first met my wife. When it came to birthdays, etc., birthday presents, she used to say, "Think black, think black, think black, think black." So I wouldn't work out what the present was. It never really worked.
It'd be hard to give you a surprise party, I suppose.
Well, that was attempted back in my 20s. The person I was with at the time decided to give me a surprise party, and it was in the days when I used to run psychic courses, etc., long before anybody else was doing it, I might add. So she organised all these people to be there. She sent me off to the gym that morning. The street I was in and lived in had a hill. And I got to the top of the hill on the way home. I went, something's up. Drove down the hill and all the curtains were drawn. I went, definitely something's up. It's a hot summer day. Something's up. Why would you have the curtains closed? So I parked the car and I thought, what do I do? And I thought, go in through the back door. So I walked through the back door behind them and said, "Happy birthday!"
So what about people who are listening who starting to develop these abilities? And some people, it just happens spontaneously, right? So what advice do you have for them?
Don't do any courses, okay? Because you get programmed with other people's thoughts on how this should happen and their rules, etc. And I found every rule that I've ever heard I've broken. It's like predicting death. That's a rule that comes out all the time. And if you're going to do a reading for me and tell me I was going to die next week, I'd say thank you because I'm going to get a big insurance policy.
Yeah.
Okay. I would suggest to anyone to look at all forms of meditation, find the ones that work for you. The one that worked for me fundamentally, and I use the most, is just breathing. So I follow my breathing, etc. I would suggest someone would do that for 2 or 3 years by themselves before they look at any group or organisation. And yes, there's an idea of like a circle, which is a psychic circle where people sit around, hold hands or whatever, and try and connect with people who passed over. Usually the more dominant ones around Brisbane do things called psychometry, which is picking up vibration off an object. There's a limitation to that, and this is an example of it. I was sitting in a circle like that probably 10 years ago, held this ring, described whatever was on the ring, and it was a man's ring, so it was pretty obvious, and I don't remember what else I said. But it was time to hand it back. Well, it was time to hand it back. I reached over, and as I was touching or dropping the ring in the person's hand, it was a lady's hand, I slightly touched her finger, and at that point I knew that the man who owned the ring had died. It wasn't until I actually touched her that I knew this person was died. Psychometry holds the vibes and, if you like, the memory of the events beforehand, and hence that's its strength, but it's also its weakness. It's a good learning tool. It's not the answer to all things, etc. You're far more better off learning to get in touch with what's going on inside of you, your thoughts, your feelings, and everything else. And so you can start to identify the difference between your thoughts, your feelings, and maybe another source.
Because I think if you're empathic as well, on top of all that, which I imagine a lot of people with those abilities are, you can get a bit confused about all that, can't you?
Oh, yeah. Sex is one of those things to be careful of, because sex and emotion are quite strong reactions within us. And if you're walking up a hill, blissfully unaware, and this happened, and in my case, walked past a young female, and then there's all this massive amount of thought about sex came in, and I went, "What? Where did that come from?" And I turned and I looked, and I went, "This came off her." Okay, I don't know what she was doing the night before, but it must have been interesting.
Wow, okay.
That's interesting, isn't it?
But as soon as I identified where it had come from, the thought stopped. And again, it's identifying what's going on inside you, where it's coming from, etc., that will help control the reaction. an emotion's not always worth listening to. Okay, it's worth respecting, but not always worth listening to. And you know, if I'm doing a reading for a client, then I would say everything that came up, which again has happened years ago. I had a lass turn up and there was a sex left, right and centre. And I said that to her and she said, yes, tell me more, because he spent a night with a guy and come from that to see me, you know, etc. Don't do that. And don't get drunk before you see a clairvoyant. Because
I'm going to rethink that.
There goes your plans for the
Or
week.
don't go see a drunk clairvoyant.
no, that's not so bad. A couple of drinks with a clairvoyant.
Just to loosen up. Just to help you click into place.
Lifts the spirits, doesn't it?
Oh, lifts the spirits, Bazza. Boom, tish.
Yeah, spirits are usually better.
Now, Stephen, I've got a burning question. I want to know a bit more about, or if you know, about the Akashic records.
Interesting statement. It's a statement that came out of the past to explain the sort of idea of knowing the past. Now, in the old books, there was often portrayed almost like a room somewhere in the universe where all the records are kept. And they were always books. Well, these days, books are not so relevant, are they?
That's right.
So, again, it's a way of explaining past events and the record of the past. Like I said, psychometry holds memory, feelings, etc. All information is out there if you are able to tap into it. And if it's a room or it's a vibe, or I really don't like the word vibe.
I'm going to stop using it then.
It's just used too much. It's just one of those words that we create to explain something, and it may also be limiting. Okay, which is also the same with the idea of Akashic records, that there is a place, etc. If your mind's open enough and there's enough intuitive aspect to your personality, you can go back into the past and potentially obviously go into the future if you have the right connections over there. Does that explain your question?
Yes, it does.
Good.
I have read and thought about it myself, and I just was interested in your perspective.
Yeah.
Have you been to the future
Have I been to the future?
in terms of your connection?
Well, I
and
did
seeing
put up
glimpses
a
of-
post of me standing in front of the TARDIS and saying that's how I got all the information about the future.
Fair enough.
But that's a good question, actually. You know, like clairvoyants, can they go into the future?
Well, the other side of that is, can people from the future, or spirit people from the future, come back here? Well, there seems to be some evidence, that's not part of my experience, but there seems to be some evidence clearly that you can tap into the future, as I've done in that particular reading, and it has happened quite a few times over the years. So in a sense, yes, you could say I've been to the future. Have I walked around in the future? No, I haven't. Have I walked on water? No, I haven't. I'm quite disappointed by that.
Friday nights on BFM with Cosmic Girl and Sifu.
I have a story about going into the future. This is a story of a paranormal couple who run a paranormal couple.
Paranormal couple as opposed to a normal couple. They're paranormal.
That's all, folks. This story is from a couple who run a paranormal group out of Newcastle, and they were doing Ouija boards, I think it was, and they connected to a group of people from the future who were alive.
Yeah, I've heard those sort of stories before.
Yes, and it was quite compelling. So maybe we can get them on the show in the future.
Yes.
Yeah. If you, there's a story. There was a manifestation group in Brisbane some years ago. They wanted to have tables tapping and all that sort of stuff, etc. And I know of two groups that did that. But this group had been sitting around a table for months on end and nothing happened. This one new individual came into the group. Within the first time they sat down, the table started tapping and doing all that sort of stuff. Now, he apparently stayed in the group for 3 weeks before he had a job change and had to go and work. The phenomenon stopped. So a lot of these phenomena seem to be selective to people. There was a lass up at Ladley when she was young, could turn lights on and off and TVs on and off when she wasn't even in the room. I still know this young lady. Okay. Somewhere in her early teens, the phenomenon stopped. She couldn't do it anymore. So that there is a dynamics to do with certain people, maybe to do with certain ages, etc., etc. Glenys Mackay's story, I gather you know Glenys quite well.
Yes. We'll have her on a future show.
Yeah, she's quite interesting. She's irrepressible. Vic and I were sitting with her at a sports club a couple of years ago, and she started talking about haunted houses and physical phenomena, etc., etc. This was a big room. This was a big dining area in the sports club, and the light above us started to flicker. No other light in the place was flickering, and we just were looking at each other, etc., going, "What's going on here?" And it was simply more than likely because Glenys, by her natural nature, has a capacity to be a trance medium, from what I can gather. Never actually seen her do it, but that phenomenon happened at that point. Now, that doesn't normally happen around me. I don't normally have weird or wonderful things happening, etc.
But a lot of people do, and a lot of people have that light bulb phenomena around them,
yes.
like street light, they call them sliders,
yes, yes.
where street lamp interference, where
yes.
people can walk under those or drive under those,
yes,
and they just pop.
So that's
off.
connected to that individual. And in my case, I've never had that happen spontaneously. I haven't levitated out of a chair or anything like that, etc., etc. Love to see it though. I really would. Asports are things that materialize. Now you've got me doing materialize from spirit. And there's a famous story which you can only find in books. You don't hear the full story, where they had a materialization.
Let me help you. Materialization group.
That's your turn to help me. And they asked the question of the trance medium: could good spirit transport a person? And spirit said yes. Well, some 10, 15 minutes later, thump on the table, there was this medium from the other side of England that turned up on the table. The part of the story that wasn't told was her clothes came 10 minutes later.
Oh, really?
That's what the story goes.
Oh, my goodness.
But Harry Edwards.
Oh, yes.
It was a famous healer back in the 40s and 50s, etc. I met a lady called Kitty, which will put the shame on any people trying to be a psychic healer at this point. Kitty used to sit in the group with Harry Edwards, and she said the most amazing thing she ever saw from him was this young boy who had only a stump of a leg. And she said Harry Edwards put his hands on this child and the leg grew in front of them. Now, I've never seen anything like that, and it's a second-hand story. Okay, I don't have any reason to think that she was lying to me or conning me in any way. She wasn't talking about herself. She said she was what she saw. Like I said, it would put most people trying to do Reiki or any of that sort of stuff to, you're wasting time.
Amazing.
Your leg.
Sorry?
I think she's pulling your leg.
A good leg joke.
Amazing, Stephen. Just
The
amazing.
story's got me stumped. You like
Goodness
that one,
me.
Bazza?
Big tick.
That's amazing, Stephen. Just, some of the stories that go around.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But, I have heard, anyway.
Now, what were you going to say? You have heard what?
Well, I have heard from a gentleman down in Adelaide who used to go to a point holding circle, which was with the work of Dr. John Whitman Ray. And the idea was that you hold a certain point, a meridian point on a person to bring about healing for particular things. And this person grew a third set of teeth after that.
A third set.
Yeah, well, you lose your baby teeth, and then they lost their adult teeth, and another set of teeth grew where the missing ones were. So there's a lot of really interesting things happen.
Relaxation Centre in Brisbane in one of their courses used to do I can't remember the name of what they called it, but it was a healing technique that they showed people, which is that people would bring a name of a sick person in, etc., to the group, okay, and then you would visualize this person or hand it to somebody else, and they would then visualize and literally use their hands to shape out the body, etc., and then go through the body and see what problems there were, okay, and that was sort of like a teaching tool. I think it was when I did it. I think it was me. But anyway, it's going through the body, and then suddenly when I got to the legs, there was no legs, and the person had lost their legs. Okay. God, I wish I could remember what they used to call that.
Were you doing the healing like on a surrogate? Or?
Well, yeah, no. It's just in front of you. So it's created this sort of image in your head. Then you created this with your hands and went through the body, sort of like through the eyes, headaches, nothing important, stomach, and got the legs. And I remember going to the legs and going, oh. And my hands wanted to come together. The person didn't have any legs. So, gosh, I wish I could remember what they call that.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah. That a lot of the techniques they used back then were for mind dynamics, which goes back quite a long time with Alexander Everett, I think his name was, etc., which was a long time ago.
Everyone's looking at me stumped. I'm just listening. I'm listening to these.
Okay, I'll give you another story. Okay.
Then we'll wind it up.
The bum story. Okay.
Bum story.
Uh-oh.
The bum story.
Everyone likes a good bum story.
Okay.
That's the end of the show.
I used to go down to all sports at Jindalee. Okay, I used to do a lot of spin classes, etc. One particular morning, I had a client, sort of 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. So I went to the early spin class in the morning. I think it was about 8 o'clock. Did the spin class halfway home. And the voice suddenly was crystal clear. And I said, tell your client all you do in the spin class is stare at the bum in front of you. Oh, okay, that's a bit odd, isn't it? Anyway, the client turns up. She turns up in gym gear, etc. Quite very early in the session, I said, they said to say to you for some reason that all I do in my spin class is stare at the bum in front of me. And she says, oh, okay. I did a spin class this morning. Oh, where did you do it? Jindalee, all sports. She was a bum in front of me that morning.
Oh, wow. There you go. They're caught out by spirit there.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't staring. Have you ever done a spin class? Pretty much.
Where you look.
That's where you look. Yeah, that's what you're looking at.
Oh, there you go. So if our listeners have a strange story that they would like to share with us, Cosmic Girl, how do they go about sharing it?
They can contact us through the Strange Encounters Down Under Facebook page.
Yeah, and what else can I do? This is your test every week.
It's a pop quiz, isn't it? They can also, if they've got a UFO report, we'd also like to hear that, but they can also report it to UFO Research Queensland too, to the Facebook page or to the website, or even call us.
What's the local number?
It is 33761780. Not many people use landlines these days, but the number's there, 33761780.
Messages?
Or we get calls on the landline, but we get a lot of messages through Facebook, email sometimes.
Okay, cool. And also they can always contact Bay FM during office hours, 38210022. And Stephen, how can we get in contact with you if we want to avail ourselves of your services?
Yes, have a reading.
Okay, reading it normally goes for about an hour, and I usually record it so people can take it home and listen to it because, like I said, some information on it can be years later. My contact number is 0403 936 997. That's the main contact number for me. So
can you just repeat it?
0403 936 997.
Just testing the memory, that's all.
I am getting on, so
well, and also for those people who had to rush off and get a pen and paper.
Okay.
So thanks so much for being on the show. It's been great. Yeah, really interesting.
And that's only a couple of the stories. I mean, after all these years, there's so many, and so many I've actually forgotten.
So then next time.
Okay. Okay. I'll be back.
I was just going to say one thing. I know we've wind up the show, but I probably edited this in anyway. An experience that you've had where you sat down to do a reading, Steve, and then for whatever reason, you've sort of gone, I can't do this. You've got a feeling of being really uncomfortable, or you've got a feeling of, for whatever reason, that you've just got to basically pull up stumps. Stumps? Why am I keep using the word stumps? I don't know. Yeah.
That's because I'm old. It has happened where I've had two different people who were connected to each other, and there was legal connections between these two people who had been seeing me, and I just could not talk to one of these people because I actually thought he was doing the wrong thing.
Like a conflict of interest type thing.
Oh, definitely. Mind you, I had a similar thing many years ago where I had a guy come to see me, did the reading, then a week later a girl comes to see me, did a reading on with her, and I was halfway through and I said, I've heard this story before, about a week ago. And she said, from who? And it's actually her ex-boyfriend. Mm. So without them knowing, they were coming to see me. But I heard basically the same story. Mm. So, yes, that's, there are times where I wish I didn't hear some of the stuff I've heard, to be honest.
How long does it take you to click into place? Like you're saying before to us that you're in a logical mindset here, you're being interviewed. If I was to try and get you to try and tune in, how long does it take you to do it? And how do you actually do it? What's a process for you to tune in?
Breathe. That's
how so? Like mindful breathing?
Some fairly strong breathing to start with, relaxing myself, focus on my potential client before they turn up, and or when they turn up, I start to focus on the client at that point. There are certain activities, like my head at the moment, I would think I'd be pushing myself to get anything at this point because my head is quite in its logical framework, which I am quite logical as a person.
Yep.
But in some cases, I've clicked into the person 24 hours beforehand.
Oh, really?
Which is frustrating because then I have to remember what I felt or heard or etc.
Okay.
Usually then in a session, whatever I felt and heard, if I've forgotten it, it usually comes up again.
Okay.
And it repeats itself. But if I'm calm, I'm relaxed, I'm not in a logical framework, then yeah. But like I said, it's almost like different parts of the brain. It's like when I finish the session with somebody, I frequently find it challenging to do maths.
I think everyone does. Well, I do.
But simple maths, 2 and 2 make 4. It's just like, and it takes usually a couple of minutes for me to completely click out of that sort of mental space, non-mental space, whatever you want to call it. So what was the original question?
That was it, you answered.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Oh, thank you very much.